Okay, so you know how sometimes when you think about relationships, like really think about them,
Hmm.
you realize there are these kind of weird, like unspoken agreements you make with people.
Yeah, definitely.
Whether it's, like the jokes you have with your friends or those like family things that you're kind of stuck with or like, even just romantic relationships. It's like this whole complicated thing.
It's so true. And they can feel like a roller coaster sometimes, right?
Totally a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So, like, have you ever wondered what actually makes them work?
It's a huge question, right? Like we usually just go with our gut feeling.
Yeah.
But there's this author, Orion Taraban, who in his book, The Value of Others, he's like, well, what if we looked at it way more analytically?
Okay. I'm intrigued. The value of others. That's interesting.
Yeah, it came out in 2024.
2024. Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah, and it's interesting stuff.
So what's his like big idea?
So basically, he says that relationships are like, at their heart, they're kind of like economic transactions.
Whoa. Okay, that's a bold statement right there.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people have that reaction, right? It's like, wait, are we talking about love or are we talking about like buying groceries?
And
He's saying that a relationship only exists where there's this exchange of value happening.
okay.
And when that exchange stops, the relationship probably does too.
I mean, I can see how that might make sense in some ways, but also it feels a little bit cold to think about it that way, right? Like I don't want to put a price tag on my friendships.
I hear you. And yeah, it can feel that way at first.
Yeah.
But think about it like this. We used to not understand how the human body worked at all. It was a total mystery.
Right.
But then science came along and we started looking at it analytically, and that's how we got all these amazing advances in health and medicine.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
Taraban's saying maybe we can do the same thing for relationships.
Yeah.
Like if we understand the underlying mechanics, maybe we can build healthier, stronger connections.
I like that. So how does this whole value exchange thing actually play out in different relationships?
Right. So think about what you love about your close friends. Like, what do you get out of that friendship?
Well, I mean, they make me laugh. They're fun to be around, and they're always there to listen when I need to vent.
There you go. Those are all forms of value, right?
Okay, yeah, I guess so.
With family, it might be more about loyalty or unconditional support, that sense of belonging.
Right.
And then romantic relationships, obviously, it's a whole other thing. There's intimacy, shared goals, maybe attraction, obviously, plays a big role.
Right, right.
So we're constantly giving and receiving all these different kinds of value, whether we realize it or not.
It makes you wonder if, like, problems start when that exchange gets out of whack, you know?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it leads us to one of Taraban's more provocative ideas about the sexual marketplace.
Ooh. Okay, sexual marketplace. Now that sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong term,
Yeah.
but it's important to understand what he means by it. He's not talking about literally buying and selling people.
Okay, good, because that would be...
Yeah, no, definitely not that. What he's getting at is the way attraction works. The kind of unspoken negotiations that happen when people are figuring out if they want to be romantic or sexual with each other.
Okay, so, like, how we size each other up, basically.
Exactly. And how we decide who's worth pursuing and who's not.
So we're all just players in this sexual marketplace.
In a way, yeah. It's about recognizing that there are forces at play, even if we're not always conscious of them.
I'm starting to see how this framework can be useful. So what are some of the key things Taraban says about how this marketplace works?
So one really interesting thing he points out is that our romantic choices aren't made in a vacuum. They're totally tied up with our bigger life goals. Like, do you want to have a family? What kind of career are you building? All that stuff factors in.
So you're saying like the kind of partner I'm looking for will be different depending on what else is going on in my life.
Exactly. He calls this the idea of nested games.
Okay, nested games. Break that down for me.
So let's say your main goal in life is to become a super successful entrepreneur. That's your big game. And within that game, there's another game, which is finding a partner who supports that ambition. Maybe someone who's also driven or who understands the demands of that lifestyle.
That makes sense.
But if you're someone who's more focused on like financial stability, maybe you're still in school or something, then you might want a partner who's really reliable and supportive in a different way, someone who can be a teammate while you're getting on your feet.
Yeah, like someone who can help you through those tough times.
Exactly.
And I guess these priorities can change as you go through life too, right?
Of course. Like what you want in your 20s might be totally different from what you want in your 40s.
Makes sense.
So that's one big piece of the puzzle. And then there's this other concept that Taraban talks about that can be a little controversial. It's the idea of captains and passengers.
Okay, I've heard of this captains and passengers thing before. I gotta say, it makes me a little nervous. Like, is this just reinforcing old-fashioned gender roles?
That's a totally valid concern. And Taraban acknowledges that the terms themselves can feel a bit loaded.
Mm.
But he's not trying to say that this is how things should be. He's more observing a pattern that he sees in a lot of relationships.
Okay, so what's the pattern?
He's saying that often one person in the relationship takes on more of a captain role, meaning they tend to provide more resources and direction,
Okay.
and the other person is more of a passenger, meaning they're looking for those things.
So like one person is the provider and the other is the receiver.
In a simplified way, yeah. But it's way more nuanced than that.
Okay, I'm listening.
He's definitely not saying this is how things should be, or that one role is better than the other.
Right.
It's more about understanding the dynamic that's at play in a lot of relationships. And, historically, men have often been in that captain role and women in the passenger role, but he's not endorsing that.
Okay, so this is more like a description of what he's observed, not a prescription for how things should be.
Exactly. He's just trying to shine a light on these patterns so we can be more aware of them.
So if someone does find themselves in that captain role, what does Taraban say they need to do to be successful?
He lays out 3 main challenges for the captain. The first one he calls building their ship.
Building their ship. What does that mean?
It's not just about money, although that can be part of it. It's about having your life together, being competent, being someone who can take care of themselves and others.
So like being responsible, mature, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it includes being emotionally mature, too. Not just being able to provide material things, but also being a reliable and supportive partner.
Okay, so it's about being well-rounded, basically.
Right. It's about having something to offer in the relationship beyond just like a paycheck.
I like that. So what's the second challenge?
Second challenge is learning to sail.
Okay, learning to sail. That sounds adventurous.
Right. This one's all about mastering 2 things, seduction and frame control.
Okay, seduction. I'm already intrigued and a little bit scared. Tell me more.
So when Taraban talks about seduction, he's not talking about like cheesy pickup lines or anything like that. It's more about understanding how attraction works and being able to generate it in a genuine way.
Okay, so it's a skill you can learn.
Exactly. He thinks anyone can learn it. It's about understanding human nature and being able to connect with people on a deeper level.
Okay, starting to get it. And what about frame control?
Frame control. This is a big one. This is about setting boundaries and expectations in the relationship. It's about knowing what you want and being able to communicate that effectively.
So like not letting yourself get walked all over.
Yeah, kind of. It's about being able to steer the ship, so to speak, and not letting the passenger dictate the course.
I can see how that would be important.
Mm.
So what happens if a captain doesn't have good frame control?
Well, they might end up feeling resentful or like they're constantly giving in to the passenger's demands, which can lead to all sorts of problems.
Right. Resentment is never good in a relationship.
Definitely not. So yeah, frame control is all about having a clear sense of yourself and what you want out of the relationship.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the passenger in this whole dynamic? What's their role?
They're definitely not just along for the ride. Taraban gives them 3 important prerogatives.
Okay, prerogatives. I like that it sounds fancy. What are they?
The first one is inspecting the ship.
Okay, so like making sure the captain is actually who they say they are?
Yeah, basically. It's about taking the time to evaluate the potential partner, seeing how they live their life, how they treat others, all that stuff, before you get too invested.
It's like doing your due diligence before you invest in a company.
Exactly. The passenger has the right and the responsibility to make sure the captain is worth their time and energy.
Okay, I like that. So what's the second prerogative?
The second one is testing the captain.
Testing the captain, so like putting them through their paces.
Kind of. Yeah, it's about seeing how they react under pressure, whether their actions match their words, if they're really as capable and reliable as they seem.
So like seeing if they can actually walk the walk.
Exactly. And then the third prerogative is choosing the journey.
Choosing the journey. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds like it's all about having agency.
It is. It's about making sure that the direction of the relationship aligns with your own goals and values. The passenger has a say in where things are going.
So as a partnership, even if there's this dynamic of one person being the captain and the other being the passenger.
Exactly. It's not about one person having all the power. It's about both people contributing and making sure the relationship works for both of them.
That's good to hear. So we've talked about nested games and captains and passengers. Is there anything else Taraban talks about in terms of like how we navigate relationships?
Oh yeah, there's a lot more. One thing he gets into is what he calls the game of needs.
The game of needs. Okay, that sounds kind of like a board game I'd be into.
It's more about how people get what they want in relationships. And not just romantic relationships, any kind of relationship.
Okay, so how does this game work?
Well, let's take a classic example, asking a friend to help you move.
Oh, God, the dreaded moving day. I've been there.
Right. So you're the one who needs help, and your friend is the potential helper.
Yeah.
On the surface, it's a simple request, but underneath, there's this whole unspoken negotiation going on.
Okay, I'm listening.
You might play up how much you need their help. You might offer them pizza and beer. You might even remind them of that time you helped them with something.
Oh, yeah, all the guilt trips and bribes come out on moving day.
Exactly. And your friend is doing their own calculations too. They're thinking about their schedule, how much they value your friendship, whether they actually like moving furniture.
Right, it's a whole mental cost-benefit analysis.
Totally. So both people are trying to influence the outcome of this game based on what they need and what they're willing to give.
So it's about recognizing that there are these hidden motives and strategies in all our interactions.
Exactly. Even if we're not doing it consciously.
So does Taraban give any advice on how to play this game of needs effectively without being like a total manipulator?
Yeah, he does. He talks about something called principles of power, which are basically like guidelines for understanding who has more leverage in a given situation.
Principles of power. I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So one example he gives is that the person who initiates contact less often usually has more power.
Okay, like the person who texts back slower and seems less eager.
Exactly. They might actually be busier or they might just be playing it cool. But either way, it creates this perception that they have more options and they're not as invested.
So it shifts the balance of power.
Yeah, and this can happen in any kind of relationship, not just romantic ones.
So Taraban's point is that we should be aware of these dynamics even if we don't want to use them to manipulate people.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices instead of just reacting blindly.
I'm with you on that.
Uh,
So earlier you mentioned something called the attraction gap, and that really stuck with me. What's that all about?
yeah, so Taraban says that it's almost impossible for two people to be exactly equally attracted to each other.
Like one person's always going to be a little more into it than the other.
Pretty much. He calls the more attracted person the adorer and the less attracted person the adored.
Makes sense.
And he says this dynamic can create all sorts of problems.
Like how?
Well, for one thing, the adorer might start chasing after the adored, which can actually make the adored pull away even more.
It's like the more you try to get someone's attention, the less interested they become.
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing about putting someone on a pedestal. The adorer might start projecting all these amazing qualities onto the adored, even if those qualities aren't really there.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
It's easy to do, especially in the early stages of a relationship when you're all excited and full of hormones.
Totally. So what's the solution here? How do we deal with this attraction gap?
Well, for one thing, just being aware of it can help. A lot of times we don't even realize that this dynamic is at play.
Right.
And then it's about managing your expectations. Don't expect the other person to be perfect or to always be as into you as you are into them.
That's good advice.
And it's also about focusing on your own self-worth. Don't rely on someone else to validate you. You're awesome just the way you are.
I love that. So we've been talking about relationships in general, but what about like the modern dating world specifically? I feel like things are so different now with all the technology and stuff.
Oh, yeah, totally. Taraban talks a lot about that, too. He says that modern technology and shifting social norms have created all these new challenges in the sexual marketplace.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one thing, birth control obviously changed everything. It basically separated sex from procreation, which had huge implications for power dynamics between men and women.
Yeah, for sure. Women have a lot more control now.
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing about pornography, which is so easily accessible these days. Taraban wonders if that's affecting men's ability to form real-world relationships.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
And then there's the fact that women are more economically and socially empowered than ever before, so they're less likely to settle for a partner who doesn't meet their needs.
Right, they don't have to.
Exactly. So it's a whole new ballgame for everyone.
It sounds like it.
Taraban actually calls it a crisis in modern relationships.
Whoa, a crisis.
Yeah.
That's pretty serious. What makes him say that?
Well, he thinks that all these factors, combined with the illusion of infinite options online, it's made it harder than ever to find and maintain a lasting connection.
Like we're always swiping and looking for something better.
Yeah, and he thinks that the traditional model of marriage might not be viable for a lot of people anymore.
That's a pretty bold prediction.
It is, but it's definitely something to think about. So yeah, the modern dating world is a complicated place.
So what's the solution? How do we navigate this crisis?
Well, Taraban has some ideas. He suggests taking a higher, slow, fire, fast approach to relationships.
Hire slow, fire fast. That sounds like something you'd hear at a business meeting.
I know, right?
Right.
But it makes sense in this context, too. He's saying, don't rush into commitment. Take your time to get to know someone. Pay attention to red flags. And if things aren't working out, don't be afraid to walk away.
So it's about being more intentional with your dating choices.
Exactly. And he also emphasizes the importance of self-knowledge. You got to know yourself, your values, your needs, your goals before you can even start looking for a compatible partner.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're looking for, how are you going to find it?
Exactly. And he warns against mistaking attraction to someone's circumstances for genuine attraction to them as a person.
Oh, yeah, like being drawn to someone just because they have a cool job or what.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It's about looking deeper than that. And Taraban also acknowledges that the traditional model of one person fulfilling all your needs might not be realistic for everyone.
Yeah,
He even talks about alternative relationship models like polyamory.
polyamory, that's a whole other conversation.
It is. But his point is that we should be open to questioning our assumptions about what relationships should look like.
I like that.
And no matter what kind of relationship you're in, he emphasizes the importance of transparency and communication.
Like being honest about what you want and what you're willing to give.
Exactly. It's the foundation of any healthy relationship.
So ultimately, is Taraban optimistic about the future of relationships?
I think he is. He believes that we can have loving, fulfilling relationships, even in this crazy modern world.
Okay, that's good to hear.
But he thinks we have to be more intentional about it. We have
Okay.
to understand the dynamics at play and make conscious choices.
So it's not about giving up on love. It's about being smarter about it.
Exactly. And he thinks that if we can get the business side of relationships, right, the practical stuff like communication boundaries, expectations, that'll create a strong foundation for love and intimacy to flourish.
I like that metaphor. So basically, he's saying that by understanding the economics of relationships, we can actually make them stronger.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, listeners, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Orion Taraban's The Value of Others. It's a book that really makes you think about relationships in a new way.
It does. It's challenging some of our assumptions and giving us some really useful tools for navigating the complexities of modern love.
So what are the key takeaways here? What do you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest thing is just to be more aware of the different forms of value that are being exchanged in your relationships and to think about the power dynamics that might be at play.
And to be intentional about your choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't just go with the flow.
But-
Figure out what you want and go after it.
Wise words. So here's a final thought for our listeners. What if understanding the economics of relationships doesn't actually kill the romance, but actually makes it stronger? What if, by being more conscious of our needs and expectations and the value we're giving and receiving, we can actually build deeper, more fulfilling connections?
That's a great question. And it's something for all of us to ponder as we navigate the ever-evolving world of relationships.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.